This is America, and this is the White House, where the president continues to insist that a peace deal with Iran is close. But are we on the verge of a breakthrough, or has Donald Trump dragged America into another forever war? I'll have more on that in a moment, but first to our Washington studio and Rob Matheson.
Thanks, Alan. So, deal or no deal? Well, Donald Trump says the US and Iran are still talking, and as Alan was saying, that an agreement is very close. Problem is, he's been saying that for 3 months. But so too has Iran, although it's been more cautious. And it seems every time negotiators appear to get somewhere, something stalls. And a war that Donald Trump initially described as a short incursion can now take at least another 12 weeks to be resolved, at least according to the Secretary of State.
They have to commit to very specific negotiations on highly enriched, the disposition of the highly enriched uranium that still is buried deep in a mountain somewhere. They have to agree on negotiating severe and long-term limitations and or cancellation of enrichment activity in their country.
In the second phase of negotiations.
Well, obviously these are highly technical matters, so I don't think you could work those out in 5 days. That would require a team of experts to meet over a 30, 60, 90-day period and work out the details.
Well, the US insists Iran has to open the Strait of Hormuz. Let me show you what's happening there on a map. Now, you can see hundreds of ships on this map that they can't get through. The ones in red are the oil tankers. The ones in green are cargo ships. But Donald Trump has said his own military blockade of the Strait could continue for at least another 3 months. Marco Rubio has outlined what the administration says it wants to see in a deal to reopen it. But critics are skeptical.
They have to reopen the straits. And reopening the straits means the following. Ships can sail through international waters the way they can do through other choke points around the world without being fired upon, without paying a toll. That's condition number one.
But the strait is closed because of our decision to invade Iran. This is a consequence of our military action.
Well, since the middle of March, the president has repeatedly said a deal is on the table. Well, nearly.
They want to make a deal. They're talking to our people. They want very much to make a deal. We'd like to make a deal, too. They are begging to make a deal, not me. They're begging to make a deal. Iran wants to make a deal, and we're dealing very nicely with them. Iran wants to make a deal.
Iran has sort of agreed to the terms. I think we're getting close to maybe doing a deal.
We're making a great deal. We're going to make a great deal. Slowly but surely, we're getting, I think, what we want.
So is Trump actually close to a deal like he insists, or has he dragged the US into yet another so-called forever war? Our chief US correspondent Alan Fisher has more.
On the night he launched Operation Epic Fury, Donald Trump made clear his primary goal of the war.
It has always been the policy of the United States, in particular, my administration, that this terrorist regime can never have a nuclear weapon.
More than 90 days in, it remains at the heart of the stop-start peace negotiations. Now that's the door that leads to the Oval Office, and just a few steps from where I'm standing, Donald Trump will sit behind the resolute desk, and he's made his demands very clear. The Strait of Hormuz must be reopened. Iran must hand over its enriched uranium to the United States or to someone else. And Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. Not now, not ever. For 40 days, the US, with Israel, hammered Iran's military and leadership. Trump agreed to a ceasefire to allow peace talks to begin. They're still ongoing, slowly, discreetly. But Trump admits he was close to ordering a restart to the war until Gulf nations intervened.
It would have been happening right now. Yeah, it's all done. The boats, the ships are all loaded. They're loaded to the brim. And we're all set to start. I got a call yesterday, sir, could you wait? We think we're close to a deal, and that's okay.
The delay has helped all sides rearm and refocus.
Well, thank you all.
Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth says the US military is ready to go again if ordered by the president.
We're postured even stronger today than we were on day one to address it that way if we have to, but he'd prefer not to. So Iran knows very, very clearly what our expectations are, and that's on the negotiating team to deliver.
But each day, the economic pressure increases. Oil supplies are running lower, prices are getting higher. One leading oil executive says prices could hit $160 a barrel by the end of the summer. Political pressure increases. Trump and the Republicans see support leaking away. The midterms are getting closer. Despite several breaches of the ceasefire, it hasn't sparked a restart to the war. Donald Trump says a deal is close, and no deal is better than a bad deal. But a deal would only extend the current pause, not bring a peace that would have to address the red lines, the fault lines. But despite the mutual exhaustion with the conflict, that still remains elusive. Alan Fisher, Al Jazeera, Washington.
I want to dig deeper into the Iranian side of these negotiations. Alex Baird has this rundown of how it looks from Tehran.
Well, according to Iranian state media outlet Fars, talks are at a complete standstill. That's been put down to Israel's continued assault in southern Lebanon, a sticking point for Tehran, who insists that any deal must end the war on all fronts. Iran has also demanded the withdrawal of American forces from around the country, guarantees against future attacks, the release of billions of dollars of frozen assets, and the lifting of sanctions. Trump has said a framework will be announced shortly, but Iran's supreme leader has reportedly not approved anything. And then there's the Strait of Hormuz, one of Tehran's key bargaining chips. It remains closed both from Iran's actions and the American military blockade. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said that the closure is costing Tehran hundreds of millions of dollars in lost oil revenue. And while that hurts Iran, it also hurts the American economy. Just look at fuel prices. But Iran is used to sanctions and it's adapted to withstand economic isolation. And on the sidelines, Iran's Revolutionary Guard is continuing the saber-rattling, saying it's yet to reveal all its military capabilities and trump cards. That's come off the back of a threat from Iran's supreme leader that the region will not return to past conditions, and Washington will no longer have a safe place to station military bases in the region. And then there's that key word when it comes to negotiations: trust. Iran has serious concerns that Washington won't honour any long-term agreements, especially after repeated surprise attacks by Israel and the United States.
I want to take a closer look also at what makes these talks different from the ones back in 2015, the ones that actually did deliver a deal with Iran. Now, the main point of the JCPOA, as it's known, was to restrict Iran's ability to enrich uranium, as well as limiting its nuclear capabilities. In return, Tehran got some sanctions lifted. That agreement took 20 months and several rounds of talks before it was signed. The Trump administration has been aiming for a deal in days in the middle of a war. And this time, it's not just the nuclear issue. Also on the agenda are the Strait of Hormuz and compensation for war damages, as well as a permanent end to the conflict. The US has also moved away from a model led by the State Department to a team close to the White House. Iran's team is made up of career diplomats and politicians and experts in the key subjects. The stakes are high too. In 2015, failure to comply would have resulted in sanctions. And now, the alternative to a deal could be a restart to the war and bombing across the region. We're joined now by David Hale. He's a former US ambassador, also former US Special Envoy for Middle East Peace. And we're joined by Adam Ereli, the former US ambassador to Bahrain. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for being with us. David, I want to start with you first. We keep talking about a deal. How much of this is actually about a deal, and how much of it is actually just trying to find some sort of common ground that they could start negotiating on?
Right. I mean, it's a fairly normal practice in situations like this for two adversaries to try to negotiate if they're willing to reconcile their differences, what we'd call a declaration of principles or of intent. So obviously it's very important for negotiators to get that declaration right, because it basically sets up the agenda for negotiations. So they're jostling over what's in there, right? With the Iranians rejecting any discussion of the nuclear programs, and of course the American side insisting upon that. It's been our long-standing objective with Iran, among others. So, but I think underlying your question perhaps is the point that even once we get a declaration of principles agreed to, if and when, then it opens up the next phase, which is going to be very complicated about all the details involved in the enrichment program, the centrifuges, the missile program, and the malign behavior in the region that Iran has conducted.
Let's talk about the regional element of this, because as I mentioned before, Adam, you're former ambassador to Bahrain. Even if there is a deal of some sort, how much power has the power balance and the dynamic within the Middle East changed, do you think?
I think that it's obvious to say that the region post-February 2026 is going to be qualitatively different than the region before 2026. Why? First of all, because the United States and Israel have shaken the hornet's nest without destroying it. And that leaves the whole western side of the Gulf exposed and stung. Iran has proven that despite all the high-tech wizardry that we and our allies have, despite the American bases, despite taking a pounding from Israel and Trump and the United States, despite all that, they're able to shut down the Arabs' airspace, shut down global shipping, destroy the energy and transportation infrastructure of the western side of the Persian Gulf. So the question for Arab leaders is, how are you better off now than you were before? That's A, and I think the answer is obvious. But B, under what kind of a deal would you actually feel safe going forward over the long term? And so that's the perspective in which I look at any discussion of a negotiated settlement. Is it more than a temporary Band-Aid? Could Iran, if and when it wants to, just go back to where we are today? In other words, having 95 to 98% of its missiles and drones launched against its enemies taken down, but still being able to wreak havoc on the economies of the Gulf and the tourism and all of that stuff. So that's the question.
David, that raises an interesting point in terms of the kind of things that they're going to be talking about, because the Trump administration has played the nuclear issue right at the center of all these negotiations. And as we were talking about, we also have Strait of Hormuz, compensation for attacks and so on. As far as the Gulf nations are concerned, the one that they're concerned about most is the missiles and the drones, because those are the things that have been hitting them hardest.
Well, I would try to broaden the aperture a little bit, respectfully. I don't think it's just about what's happening at the moment in terms of the capabilities. I think, first of all, it's important to bear in mind these Gulf states are all different. They all have different attitudes and different national security strategies and different economies. They also have different relationships with the United States. Secondly, there's one thing they say in public and there's another thing they say in private. And in private, most of them, and I'm really talking about the core, which would be Qatar, Saudi, and the Emirates, as the real ones that have dynamic strategies, they have lived in the shadow of Iran's nuclear threat for a long time. I think that what I hear from them is not a desire that the United States stop this, but that we complete the job. The last thing they want, to use Adam's analogy, is where we stir up the nest and then leave them to deal with the consequences of it. What they want us to do is make sure that we're there long enough to complete the job of neutralizing Iran's ability to project power, whether it's through nuclear weapons or through drones or through missiles or through proxies like Hezbollah.
Let me respond to that, because I agree completely with David. Yes, they want us to finish the job. But the problem is we can't. What this conflict has shown us is that what it would take to complete the job is beyond what's possible. Okay, what would it take to finish the job? And you talked about the JCPOA. What did it take to get the JCPOA, which was a negotiated agreement? It took a couple of things. Number one, it took a coalition. The United States was with the EU. And it was only because we had the EU and others pressuring Iran that we were able to bring them to the table. We don't have that. We're going it alone with Israel, which isn't enough. Second of all, it would basically take, in order to finish the job, it would take not only removing the regime, which Trump promised to do but has manifestly failed, but it would also take disarming Iran. Because as long as Iran, under whatever government may be there, as long as Iran has the military capability to strike its neighbors, whether it's nuclear or conventional or asymmetric, they are a threat. And the Gulf leaders cannot relax. And unless the United States can deliver that and satisfy their wishes, which I think are reasonable,
we're going to be stuck with some variation of the status quo.
David, we're talking about both two sides who have very different, or appear to be working to very different timelines, as we were talking about. The administration wants this done as quickly as possible. Iran, on the other side, seems to have, as far as it is concerned, a great deal of time. It can make this last for as long as it wants. Why is that? Why does Iran feel that it's got that advantage?
Well, this has been the pattern of the relationship since the revolution in 1979. We've had 8 American presidents try to find a way to find some basis for coexistence with Iran on terms that we could live with. But the Iranians have learned that 8 presidents develop 8 different policies, and even some presidents have changed their policies in the course of their administration. So all they need to do is sit back and wait. And so particularly a strategy based on pressure has to include persistence, which Americans are not particularly good at in the conduct of foreign policy. But to judge the success or failure of this approach, which is very different than JCPOA, it is a unilateral approach, but we have Israel and we have our Arab allies who are more aligned with us than they have been for a long time, with us, so long as we are persistent in applying the pressure and not judging things day by day.
If the war drags on until the midterms, because this is going to have political ramifications, I think that's pretty clear. It could, of course, have an impact on how people are going to vote. And polls have shown large numbers of Americans don't support this action. They say they're fed up with paying higher prices, both in stores and at the petrol pumps. But Donald Trump, whose personal polling is lower than it's ever been, says the midterms aren't going to matter.
They thought they were going to outweight me. You know, we'll outweight him. He's got the midterms. I don't care about the midterms. Look what happened last night. That was the prelude to the midterms. People understand it. They know that, very simple, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I'm doing that for the world. I'm not doing it just for us.
Adam, if the president isn't that bothered about the midterms as he claims to be, and he doesn't feel that kind of pressure, then there is an indication this could be dragging on. We heard from Marco Rubio that it could take another 12 weeks or so. Is there any scenario, do you think, in which America does benefit from this conflict being dragged out?
No. No. Look, if the Democrats take the Senate, House is important, but it's really the Senate, because the Senate is the one that is going to make the difference in terms of forcing the president's hand. If the Democrats take the Senate, it's going to be a very different reality in 2027. War powers cutting money for this kind of thing. They'll have several tools of pressure to exert over America's use of power. And, oh, by the way, give Iran a free pass, or at least loosen the noose that's around their neck. So Trump has a very narrow window, actually, to make or break a deal, right? To David's point, however, there doesn't seem to me to be any indication that the two sides are closer on the make or break issues. Sanctions, nuclear program, reparations. You know, giving up on that. I mean, if Donald Trump gave up on that, made concessions before the elections, that would be not, if not fatal, a mortal wound to the Republican.
I do want to talk about the kind of pressures within the US that Donald Trump is facing. He was asked if he thought that the financial impact on Americans was going to matter when it comes to talking about Iran, and he said no.
Not even a little bit. The only thing that matters when I'm talking about Iran, they can't have a nuclear weapon. I don't think about Americans' financial situation. I don't think about anybody. I think about one thing. We cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. That's all. That's the only thing that motivates.
David, Exxon's chief was warning that Brent crude could get over to about $160 a barrel. I think he said that's if stocks continue to drop down and the backup stocks around the world, the reserves, aren't released. Is there a concern, do you think, that there is, at least within the administration, that there is going to come a tipping point within the American public when they are going to say, no, enough is enough, we can't do this anymore, you have to stop this war?
I'm sure there's a very strong debate going on within Republican circles and within the White House on these very matters. But in my own experience, presidents don't change their foreign policies because of midterms. George Bush was very unpopular in 2006, and he could have fired his defense secretary before the 2006 elections. He waited until after because he didn't want to look like he was bowing to that kind of pressure. My guess is Trump's psychology may well be the same. Also, the clip that you showed, I mean, it has an impact, but I think he's trying to address the Iranians, who, the more they see that the American president wants a deal, the higher the price for the deal gets. So I think he's, in his own way, trying to tackle that problem. I'm not an expert on the energy markets or prices, but from what I see, you know, it's a futures-based market and has not risen above levels of 2022. We survived 2022.
Adam, we've seen the nature of the conflict with Iran change over the last few weeks. It's gone from an all-out war to a succession of skirmishes which occasionally escalate and then they kind of pull back. I mean, is the US now getting closer to the kind of long-term conflict, the long-term crisis that Donald Trump said that he was determined that he was going to try and avoid?
Well, yeah. I mean, look, I don't see how you can cast this conflict as anything less than a failure for the United States, right? I mean, basically the situation we have today and for the foreseeable future is a no war, no peace situation where both sides are still antagonists. And when I say both sides, I mean on one side, the United States and its Arab allies, and on the other side, Iran and its partners, right? So now and for the foreseeable future, we have a no war, no peace situation where you have two antagonistic sides seeking to avoid escalation, but always prepared for that eventuality, which is exactly what Donald Trump promised wouldn't happen when he started this whole thing.
I want to move on to the significance of Israel's attacks on Hezbollah in Lebanon, because this has been a crucial element as far as Iran is concerned, certainly since this conflict began. Tens of thousands of people in Lebanon have been forced to flee their homes under Israeli bombardment. Israeli forces have seized large parts of southern Lebanon. As they say, they're trying to demilitarize Hezbollah. And those attacks on Lebanon have been a major sticking point for Iran in negotiations. Now, on Monday, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi issued this statement on social media. He said the ceasefire between Iran and the US is unequivocally a ceasefire on all fronts, including in Lebanon. Its violation on one front is a violation of the ceasefire on all fronts. Well, civilians have been killed in both Lebanon and Israel. And Donald Trump said he forced Israel to call off an offensive in Beirut. There have been talks here in the US to try to bring a halt to the fighting. Manuel Rapolo has been following those talks for us. So the talks are now over, Manny. What did they achieve?
Rob, one of the things that we should be careful to underline regarding these talks that are taking place between Israeli and Lebanese delegations here in Washington is that outside of these diplomatic negotiations that are now just concluded their fifth round at the State Department, there is no formal diplomatic relationship that exists between Israel and Lebanon. So from the perspective of U.S. diplomats that are seeking to sort of institutionalize a framework, a space where these types of talks, good faith negotiations, as U.S. officials have described them, can take place, that in and of itself is being seen as a success, at least among U.S. diplomats. With that said, what we're hearing overwhelmingly from U.S. officials is that the talks themselves are going well. One State Department official told me that the talks themselves are going even better than they had initially anticipated, which obviously can be quite difficult to reconcile, this idea that talks are going well while we're still seeing violence play out on the ground and escalation taking place over the course of the last few days. For Israel, the main sticking point is the full disarmament of Hezbollah. We heard that reiterated over and over again from Israeli officials. We heard that once again early on Wednesday. I want to play you a soundbite from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu speaking to CNBC about that. Take a listen.
If we want to save Lebanon, and if we want to get a Lebanese-Israeli peace, as I do, we have to disarm Hezbollah, and we have to demilitarize Lebanon. And I think that's a goal that, it's not I think, I know that this is a goal that the President and I share. And that's what we have to do. So we're trying to, how shall I say this, degrade Hezbollah so that a free and independent Lebanon can emerge. We're still working on it, but we're en route.
So more broadly, the talks that are taking place between Israel and Lebanon are important because the border that exists between those two countries has become one of the biggest flashpoints in the region in terms of the wider conflict with Iran. Now, I don't believe that anybody in terms of diplomats or U.S. officials or officials from either one of those two countries would say that a peace agreement between Israel and Lebanon would bring about an end to the war with Iran. But the conventional wisdom, at least from U.S. diplomats, is that it does bring both countries and Iran closer to sort of solving that larger puzzle.
Michael Rapallo, thank you very much indeed. So, as Manny was outlining there seems to be a divergence, if you like, of the kind of end games that are now going on between what Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to achieve in terms of Hezbollah and Lebanon and what the Trump administration is trying to achieve, which, of course, is, they say, a quicker end to the war. Can you just, David, talk to us about how you see the relationship now between Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump, Israel and the US, and the significance in terms of trying to find a conclusion to the Iran war?
Right. Well, Israeli prime ministers and American presidents have relationships that have their ups and downs, so I wouldn't overreact to momentary points. I think, though, it's interesting here, and I spent 9 years as a diplomat in Lebanon, thanks to the IDF's decimation of Hezbollah and the pressure we've applied on Iran, the leadership of Lebanon is no longer operating under the shadow of assassination and threats and influence and decisions being made in Tehran and not in Beirut. So what we have actually is a state of Lebanon and a state of Israel that are trying to work together through 5 rounds now to tackle the common problem, their shared problem, which is Iran and Hezbollah. And so, of course, Iran and Hezbollah will do everything they can to impede that. But Hezbollah's ability to do it is not significant. Yes, we're all reacting to what we've seen over the weekend, but compared to the way it was before, this is a pale imitation of what they could have done in the past. And yes, Iran wants to link it so they can put themselves back in the driver's seat. The important thing now is together with Israel, the United States, and Lebanon to give the Lebanese army and the political leadership in Lebanon the capacity to do the job against Hezbollah and see what relationship can come of that with Israel.
Adam, just we're going to leave it there for the moment, gentlemen. I'm really sorry, but thank you very much indeed. I do want to thank David Hale, former US ambassador and also former US Special Envoy for Middle East Peace, and Adam Ereli, former US ambassador to Bahrain. That's all from me. See you soon.
Thanks, Rob. And don't forget, wherever you are in the world, you can always watch the latest episode of This Is America at 18:30 GMT, Monday to Friday. That's 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time if you're watching here in the United States. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.